This video was brought to you by YugiohMint.com. Check out their selection of over 20,000 cards and prices better than TCG Player.
Alright, we're finally doing this. This is my ZTB ZTB deck profile from the NLG 1K. I finished second place in Swiss. Top 8 did split, for those of you asking. So, guys, if you could do me a favor, check out YugiohMint.com down there, you know, in the description. If you enter MCool40 on checkout, you'll save yourself a little bit of money, and you guys will be able to get, actually, probably the finishing pieces. Yugioh Mint helped me finish my SP Avenires that I needed for this deck to finish this thing at its most beautiful point. So, check them out, YugiohMint.com, down below in the description. So, let's talk about this beast. I finished 5-1 out of 50 people. My only loss was to fucking Luard, which you guys will see in the feature match later this week. I lost round 3. Somebody at the event made the comment, how the fuck are you doing well with ZTB? Because this deck is literally as helmet as you can get. I didn't have to do any real playtesting with this. My friend just gave me the list through the week, and I went to town. This deck is even more powerful than Blaster. I played against a few people at the event, and a few of them where they would no-guard the Vanguard at 4 damage, not knowing that I was playing 12 crits, and they got punished for it. Super fucking hard. Easiest $125 of my life, to be honest. And I was very confident. I could have beat Luard if I'd fucking remembered that Diablo was a card. Same fucking reason why Austin lost and threw away his top cut. You know, if I'd factored for Diablo instead of just G-guarding, we wouldn't have just got my ass handed to me. Attrition made me forget that a card existed, and that's partially my fault. So, alright, so anyway, this is ZTB. 4 jets. There are only 6 grade 3s. This is your best fucking thing you could ever have. Time Leap and Chrono Drain into a Jet Fuel. Jet Fuel is the Jeffrey clone. Is really cool. The really nice thing that this deck can do, if you're playing against Nubatama, you can leave yourself nothing on the board. Or if you do leave yourself anything, it is minuscule at best. If your best case scenario, if you have 2 of the Jeffrey clones, I mean, the card you call off Duran is going to bounce back to your hand. Jeffrey will go into the soul, you'll draw a card. And at most, the column you call off of Avenir will probably float. And I don't think a lot of people realize just how fucking stupid Avenir is. Getting 4 attacks is really massive. So, there's that. And then 2 of these. Against Graham Blue, I locked myself at 2 damage. Both were counterblasted. And for the rest of the turn, actually the rest of the game, I just kept going into this. Time Leap a 2 into this. And he really didn't catch on. This just continuously unflips if I have nothing open, and this card is fucking amazing. The fact that with the ZTB stuff off of this on your restander, it's so fucking broken. I can't stress this enough. Like, this is ideal. You can play one other Chrono Jet and cut one of these. The amount of times I had this guy in my damage zone as a possible one of, it would have been disgusting. So there's that. The other reason why this deck does good is because this deck is the king of grade 2s. So 3 10Ks, I tested 4, I didn't like 4. A lot of the OCG lists that were playing, actually yes, this is based off of the OCG. Fucking, if we've learned anything, we look to the OCG, because they seem to be smarter than we are. OCG lists were rotating between 4 of this and 3 of this. If you re-ride, you play down with this deck. You play down with this deck as fucking hard as you can. You do not want to lose. Your first stride is pretty much take it or leave it. In certain matchups like Graham Blue where they can just overpower you, if you play down and force them to ride first and they're pressured at 5 damage, well, good news, Crit City's coming to town. It's the reason why this deck is so fucking good. It's literally just because of Crit City. So, 3 of these. This fucking stupid card that's not G-Brick. Typically, you will always put the Duran behind the Vanguard, and then you can call this Counterblast 1, rest the Duran, bind the top, draw 1. I don't know why they made this card. 4 of it is pretty much mandatory. I hate and like this card. I fucking hate this card after the turn you use its skill, because most of the time you're not going to fucking be able to intercept with it. Most of the time, if they're swinging at you, well, kudos to you. I mean, the Vanguard swings in, oh boy, 1 to pass. Oh wait, you're 11k to my 10k. Oh wait, it's not a pass because you got the booster. You know, I don't know. Most of the time, this just gets called over and dies, unfortunately. I don't like to expend more resources than I need to. 4 Liger 0. This card is the tits. I fucking love this card so much. During your turn, if you have a Vanguard with Chrono Jet in this card name, this gets 2k. And Rearguard, kind of +1 issue and attacks the Vanguard, may pay its cost due. Look at the top 3 of your deck. Reveal up to 1 Zodiac Time Beast from among them, add it to your hand, put the rest in the bottom of your deck. You don't shuffle! This is really cool with the stand trigger, but we're not playing the stand trigger because I don't like the stand trigger. Stand trigger is... I just don't like it. This is the MVP of the deck. This thing wins games. There were so many times where my opponent had 3 cards in their hand, and I'll just be like, oh, cool, attack. Oh, I have 6 rear guards. Skill plus an extra 8k, plus the booster, plus trigger power. This thing often got over 30. Just by itself. It breaks numbers. The resist is cute, but 9 times out of 10 doesn't really matter. You can call this in a column. It'll remove itself from the field. That way you don't call over it with Avenir, which is so fucking good. Alright, so 4 Jeffrey Clone. Best card in your deck. If you're playing against Nubatama, this thing just goes into your soul at the end of the battle. Draw a card. Okay. So, you call this off of the Duran. Call the Duran. Call the Jet. Alright, oh, look at that. We have a column now, and then this bounces back to your hand, and then this goes in the soul and that's your free card. Fucking stupid. So fucking good. I cannot stress this enough. You know, in your match with Nubatama, you don't want to get dominated. You can manage your counterblast. It won't be an issue. Same thing. I played against Wiseman this weekend. I locked myself at 2, much like I did with the Grand Blue matchup, and I don't really care. You know, you have counter-charging options for this. It's actually one of the reasons why I like this deck. The amount of skill and the amount of generation that you go through is really high. You just have to remember, you're playing against yourself, because typically by your 3rd stride, you're probably going to deck out for how fast you're turboing. For the new stride fodder, this deck thins this guy out of my deck and drops it. The only scenario in which I did anything with that. I just deck thin the 3 out, that way I could go faster with triggers. So, I mean, hey, we're always decking triggers. 4 Arca, this card's fucking amazing! GV2 bind 1, add this back to your hand when you have another one, and drop. Oh, Value Town, so good. I actually underestimated this card, but super good. 1 Picari just for 8k base. I took out the 10k for this. This was fine as a 1-of. So that's the good ones. Starters, 2 Drans. Typically, when you go through your first Dran, you can Rafana out into another Dran. So when you go into your next stage or groovy turn, you can just time leap up another column. So good. And then our triggers, super vanilla. 4, 4, 4, and 4. Okay, so for those of you asking why I didn't play the stand trigger, I don't like the stand trigger. Stand trigger, I understand it. It's adorable, gets you an extra attack. This lets me go double Vanguard swing with next stage and just not care, which is actually really nice. You don't really get punished playing this. You just have extra value in your shields here, which really worked out. And also, this lets me out Helmet Blaster, which was actually really nice. Being able to just crit push Blaster, so beautiful. I actually played against someone, and what was it? They were 2 damage. They no-guarded, and we got crit, crit, crit. It was not a beautiful time in my life, but you know, sometimes just get you there. So I mean, no regrets. This was super optimal for what it needed to do, with just the pressure that this deck did and of people not knowing how to play against it. No regrets. So, like I said, stand trigger is adorable for the extra attack, just for the loops it can do, but it's not really worth it. Not when your game plan is just out turbo your opponent. So, alright, first thing I need to explain, 3 next stage. In playtesting, we found out that your second stride's typically gear groovy, but we found out that that wasn't enough in certain matchups. You need to be able to Groovy for the extra 5k is adorable. For those of you that don't know, it is ruled that your Groovy can only, if you only have a next stage face up when you flip, you can copy the next stage. You don't have to copy 2. You fulfill as much of the effect as you can. Fucking Vanguard rulings. I love it. So, typically, second stride is this, third stride will be your Groovy. So, it's just, it's for the pressure. And we don't really have a choice. We have to go this route, just because the TCG, some matchups are a little bit different than the OCG and how they handle things. So this is for aggressiveness. Typically when you're going into this, you've already burned out the candle. So 2 of these, very self-explanatory. The guy you will flip, if it's your third stride, will be your ZTB Pegasus. But yeah, this is just 31k pressure. 4 Avenir. There was no game where I made 2 of these. This is my first stride always. There wasn't a scenario where I wanted this to be another stride, which is really weird because this card is really good. But typically just going into this first stride, getting in the 4 attacks with the potential to deck them, and then you just go next stage Gear Groovy. It alleviates... it does what it needs to do. There's no real reason to... I get why you have to play it, just for additional pressure. There might be a time where you just don't want to discard 3 cards from your hand, but I mean, you're playing 12 crits. You know, if any of the attacks land, you know, it does what it needs to do. 1 Pegasus, never made this as card's butt. It's only good for its in the G zone with the global 1000 to the front row. That's all I can really say about this. You gotta remember, Pegasus doesn't have to flip itself, flips anything. I never made this. I get why it's here. You flip it with Gear Groovy. A lot of the builds playing 2, sure, I'm sure there's more complicated things that you can do with this deck splitting. But, you know, we pushed as hard as we could when we could. One of your alternate strike conditions, never needed to go this. The deck was so consistent, but it's here in case you need it for the skill tree. 1 Sabreeze. Once again, never made this. Typically I would re-ride and not allow my opponent to Sabreeze me, but it's here in case you need it. If the Grand Blue player would have given me the 2nd damage, instead of just stacking rare cards, we would have made this, but we didn't. 1 Header Around. We heavily contemplated 2, but you need 2 of this card. So, when you play this deck, you have to realize this deck is literally Luard. This deck moves as fast as Luard does. You know what your deck doesn't do that Luard does? Replenish itself. So you need to be aware. When you are playing this deck, Uluru is your best friend. We were on double head around. I tested it. It's good. Your issue is Wiseman's not really a good deck because everything kind of beats it. And our last G Guardian is Rafana, just a basic setup. We're not playing the Time Etching Maiden. Didn't need her. I'm not playing the GB8. I don't really care about the acceleration. So this was pretty basic. So final thoughts on this deck. I'm very happy with this. It's the first time that I've played Gear Chronicle in a while that I actually enjoyed playing Gear Chronicle. Just the fact that this deck moves as fast as this build does, it's super crazy good. And you know, you have to understand, this deck doesn't really require a lot of playtesting. I know I'm going to get shit in my comments section when I say that. You know, they're like, oh my god, you know, why the fuck are you playing a deck that doesn't require skill? Deck does require a decent amount of skill. You have to decide when you're going into this. You have to decide when to use your 1 header around, which actually makes a fucking difference, contrary to popular belief. You know, sometimes it might be more effective to just let the fucking Wiseman just do his thing, you know. In that matchup, you can lock yourself at 2 damage and just not care, you know, just hunky-dory down, you know, just start taking damage when the Wiseman comes to town. It's not really that much of an issue, you know, just play conservative, you know. Vanguard is a game that people won't give it credit for, but there are plays that you can make as long as you're a better player than your opponent. You can manage the game state, you know, be surprised. There's a lot more crazy moves this weekend with the new set than I had really imagined there to be. And Blaster really let me down as a competitive deck. That deck is so easy to break. Gancelot's a fucking joke. I'm sorry to say. You know, this deck moves faster than Gancelot Turbo does. You know, on my first stride I Avenir you, I pretty much blew you out. The only matchup that was really an issue against Blast was when my opponent had 4 perfect shields. You know, my opponent's got 12 cards in hand. I'm sitting here slamming next stages in the face. I'm fucking double triggering. Everything's going on the rear guards. That fucking shield is super fucking stupid. I ended up getting through the entire hand on the next stage turn. And I had to Uluru to set up. It was the one scenario where I was considering the Avenir. But it didn't end up happening. I didn't have to go down that route. But fucking goddamn it. Having a perfect shield to just Soul Blast is so ridiculous. I mean, I thought Arca was bad, being able to just bind a copy of it and recur it back to the hand. But Soul Blast 1, perfect shield, you know, being able to do that on my first stride turn is pretty good. But I think the biggest thing I had going for me this weekend was people underestimated ZTB. A lot more people were uneducated about what was going on in the OCG metagame, which is actually very interesting because I always tell people, hey, you know, you should be researching, you know, see what's winning over, you know, across these. But people choose not to do it, and you know, they get punished. You know, the issue with Time Leap is it's Time Leap. You know, it's still a very good, solid deck, but your issue is you're still Time Leap. There are some hybrid decks that are incorporating both of them. Sure, you know, that's pretty cool. There's things you can do with that, but straight 12 crit gets the job done. Bada bing, bada boom, not an issue. I don't know how you play against this deck. Probably just don't no guard the Vanguard at 4 damage because you are going to die. It happened to a lot of people that where I don't know why people would no guard the Vanguard, but I guess if they don't know I'm playing 12 crits, it's all on them. So guys, check out YugiohMint.com down below. Enter MCL40 on checkout, save yourself some money. Hope you guys enjoyed this. It is nice to be back on Gears. I enjoyed Garmore for what time I had with it. You know, we're still going to see Garmore on this channel, but we are back on Gear Chronicle. I'm super excited. Alright guys, deuces, I'm out.